All right, I think we'll get started. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Ingracia, and I'm the interim dean of VCU's College of Humanities and Sciences. And I'm really delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's discussion, Memories of January 6th. And I want to say how inspired I always am by the programming the Department of Political Science puts on. And this is another great example of the originality and inventiveness that they bring. This conversation on this particular time in the history of our democracy has never been more crucial. With the rise of radical authoritarian populism around the globe and the seeming normalization of the same, we witness the violent and destructive power of those who challenge the value of democracy. Alarmingly, we see this impulse with greater frequency. Domestically, we see it in locations like New Mexico, where a recent series of drive-by shootings targeting Democrats reminds us that false claims about a stolen election pose a danger to our political officials and our democratic institutions. Internationally, we've seen it most recently on January 8th of this year in Brazil, a much younger democracy, where supporters of former Brazilian President Bolsonaro ransacked the presidential palace, Congress, and Supreme Court, proclaiming that the recent election was stolen. During that incident, the competence and confidence of the police in Brasilia stood in stark contrast to the two officers with us here today, Harry Dunn and Danny Hodges. And I'd like to briefly introduce both gentlemen. Both Officer Dunn and Officer Hodges were awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal on January 6, 2023, for their extraordinary service on that same date 2 years earlier. The Citizens Medal is one of our nation's highest civilian honors, recognizing citizens of the United States who have performed exemplary deeds of service for their country or their fellow citizens. We are honored to have them here today. Harry Dunn joined the U.S. Capitol Police in 2008, and since 2011 has served as the officer rank as Private First Class. PFC Dunn provided security for scores of major events at the Capitol, including presidential inaugurations, joint sessions of Congress, and State of the Union addresses. The recipient of several awards and commendations for his exemplary service, he has also served as a crisis intervention officer, responsible for assisting individuals who may be experiencing a mental crisis, and as a member of the USCP crisis negotiation team, trained to respond to hostage or barricade situations. When awarding PFC Dunn the Presidential Citizens Medal for his courageous defense of the citadel of our democracy and for seeking truth and healing, as President Biden said, Biden praised the way Harry Dunn put his protective instincts to a higher purpose as a U.S. Capitol Police officer. As Biden stated, he rushed to protect injured fellow officers fighting back insurrectionists. His powerful testimony describing violence and stinging racism laid bare the day's facts for history, and his advocacy on behalf of officers battling lasting trauma is helping to ease the stigma around mental health in our nation. Joining Private First Class Harry Dunn is Officer Daniel Hodges. Daniel Hodges joined the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department in 2014. On January 6th, Officer Hodges responded to the attacks on the U.S. Capitol as Capitol Police were overrun, and I understand it was the first time he'd actually been in the Capitol building. While fighting in the tunnel, Officer Hodges was crushed by rioters in the West Terrace doors of the Capitol and beaten. He returned to full duty within a month and continues to serve as an officer. In his congressional testimony on the events of January 6th, Officer Hodges repeatedly used the term terrorism to describe what happened that day. He has called for accountability for the attacks and the efforts to prevent the certification of the 2020 presidential election. When awarding Officer Hodges the Presidential Citizens Medal, President Biden described him as someone who dedicated his life to serving his community and our nation, praising his heroism and unwavering commitment to the truth. As Biden described, on January 6th, Officer Hodges fought to push surging insurrectionists away from a key tunnel, returning to the line even after being brutally crushed and beaten. Subsequently, his courageous testimony will help ensure that we never forget or let such an attack happen again. We're honored to have both men here. Moderating this afternoon's discussion is Dr. Alex Keena. Unfortunately, Dr. Tria Wrighton had planned to join us, and she is unfortunately ill and unable to do so. Dr. Keena is an assistant professor of political science at VCU and a leading scholar of gerrymandering and redistricting, having published Gerrymandering the States and Gerrymandering in America. I'd like to close with a quotation from former President Jimmy Carter in an address he made to the Indian Parliament in 1978. He compared the experience of democracy to the experience of life itself, describing it as always changing, infinite in its variety, sometimes turbulent, and all the more valuable for having been tested in adversity. Officer Dunn and Officer Hodges, witnesses to history, remind us of the truth of that statement. They demonstrated tremendous courage on January 6th and continue to do so when they tell their powerful story. We're thrilled to have them here today, and we look forward to a lively discussion.
All right, thank you very much for the introductions. Today we're just going to have a casual conversation. And I want to say before we start that some of the questions that I've prepared in advance were formulated with some feedback from students and my co-moderator, Professor Wrighton, who isn't here. But I'm also going to open the floor for audience questions at some point. So if you have any questions, please hold them. And at some point, during our time together, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. So the first question that I have is perhaps each of you could sort of explain how you got to the Capitol building on January 6th, not just like that day, but what drew you to policing as a vocation, and how did you end up in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the U.S. Capitol or inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th?
Well, I'll start it. Thanks, y'all, for coming out. Look forward to talking with y'all, just having a good casual conversation. Thanks to VCU for having us here. I never get tired of talking about it. To get tired about talking about it, but I never get tired of telling the truth about it. I'm from Maryland, born and raised in the area, so I'm a local to Washington, D.C. and just being a police officer, like 5 and 6 years old, you know, they ask you what you want to be when you grow up. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a policeman. I kind of like stayed true to that, and helping people is big. What I care about, being able to help people, and that's the way I view policing. Being able to be a servant to your community and to your fellow man, help them out, and that's what I hope that I bring and I represent as a police officer. Capitol Police, honestly, when I just started, it was one of the first people in the highest paying jobs that got back to me. Kind of like when you're young and you first start out, you're like, who's the first and who pays the most? That's where I'm going. And but growing into learning about the democratic process, and I couldn't be happier with the choice that I made, being able to have a small role in protecting our democracy that this country has had for so long.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for having us. It's great to be here. I was born and raised in North Carolina and moved up to Northern Virginia when I was 16 with my family. Graduated high school, went to George Mason University for a time. I studied English and conflict analysis and resolution, and I had a few internships as an English major. I was interned at the First Amendment Center at Vanderbilt University as an editor, and a copy editor somewhere else. And I was good at it, but I could, being in an office for 8 hours a day, I could feel the fluorescent lights draining my soul. I had to get out of there and do something else. So I started looking at more non-traditional occupations. I originally when I was looking at emergency services, actually, I joined the Virginia National Guard in 2012, did a 6-year contract. And but I decided that wasn't for me in terms of long-term. So I stayed with the Guard and finished my contract there. I was really looking at being a firefighter, but they do a lot more emergency medicine, which is a different kind of pressure to me, not something that I was really looking for. So I looked at policing, and I applied all over Northern Virginia. Couldn't get in anywhere there. It was a lot harder then than it is now. But DC called me back. So I went through, I passed all their tests and got in with DC, and I'm still there today.
So I think just in case our audience members don't understand, there are a lot of overlapping jurisdictions in Washington, DC. There's a lot of different police forces. So so maybe each of you could explain what day in the life was like for you on your job, since being a Capitol Police officer is a little bit different than being a DC Metro Police officer.
So Capitol Police, we're charged with protecting the Capitol complex, surrounding areas, and basically providing a safe, secure environment for members of Congress to fulfill their congressional responsibilities. And whatever those responsibilities are, that's their business, but we're making sure they can do it in a safe environment. We do talk about, we do respond to, disorderly calls, regular police calls. But our number one focus is providing Congress a safe environment to do their responsibilities. Like you said, that's our primary jurisdiction. And Danny can elaborate a little bit more about metropolitan, but we do have overlapping jurisdiction and talk about what they do there.
Yeah, DC police is, we're just the regular police for DC. When people think of DC, it's usually about, the Capitol or the mall or all these tourist destinations. And while that is obviously a part of DC, it's also a city where people live and work. And so we serve those people mainly, just normal calls for service, everything from lost property to homicides and whatever else is going on. That's what we take care of. And we do not have primary jurisdiction over federal land. So like the United States Capitol or the mall or anything like that, but we do partner with them. So when they need help, we help them out like we did on January 6th.
Cool. So let's get to the actual date of January 6th. So it sounds like the typical day on the job. It's kind of atypical. That's sort of the nature of policing, but it's certainly, were there moments before January 6th where you had to do sort of like riot control, or were there any sort of protests? Was this like a routine thing? I mean, it's Washington, DC, so I imagine there's a lot of protests all the time.
Yeah, we both have in different capacities, some similar. One thing you got to realize is, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest. These rights are guaranteed to the American people, American public. And it's a right that we should not take for granted at all. And we should be happy that we have the right to do that, because in some other countries, you say something bad about the government and that's it, Yeah. So being able to have that right is something that's very important, near and dear to me, and being able to provide people the opportunity to do that safely, keyword safely, peacefully, is exciting to me. It's like I like having this role in the democratic process. However, well, let me back up a second. So people come to the Capitol to protest, demonstrate freedom of expression, all kinds of things, all their displeasures, and even their pleasures with the government, their elected officials, any kind of gripes they may have, which they're allowed to do. I've seen everything from 24-hour Bible readings to, like we had a real life Nazi at the Capitol carrying out paraphernalia, and somebody protesting infant circumcision and everything in between. People go up there and they protest. That's their right. They're allowed to. And the Million Man March, tomorrow there's the Right to Life March, and there's the Women's March on Sunday. So large scale events. We're just there to ensure everybody's safe. And Danny, a different experience.
Yeah, we people come from not only all over the country, but all over the world to protest in DC. Particularly, it's unique because of the United States' hegemony on the world stage, but also because you have that right here, and it makes it an ideal spot to air your grievances. So people come from all over the world, come to DC to say their piece, get say in front of cameras and get their message out there. So we have a lot of experience with protests. Most notably, most recently would be 2020, Black Lives Matter protests and riots. I worked all summer, most of the year in that capacity. When it was busiest, my platoon was working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week with no days off. But you know, we do it for everybody who shows up. Doesn't matter what your political leanings are, doesn't matter your demographic. You know, we just try and afford you the right that you are given under the Constitution, and do our best to make sure everything goes smoothly and safely.
So back to January 6th. So let's start in the morning. How did that day start out for each of you? And what were you doing when the protests began, I guess, towards the Washington Monument, right? And then progressed towards the Capitol building. If you can maybe retrace your steps. Sorry, I know you've probably been asked this 1,000 times, but.
Well, it paints a picture. Danny was started down at the Ellipse. If you're familiar with DC at all, that's down by the White House, down by the Washington Monument, which is about 16 blocks away from the US Capitol, where I was. Driving into the city that morning, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's in DC, everybody's working from home. There's no traffic. You roll out of bed at 6 o'clock and get into work at 6:20 with no problem. Now you got, everybody's back to work now. But
Wake up at 5 o'clock.
yeah, exactly, right. And you're still late. But to paint the picture, it was nobody during that time period. The holidays had just ended. Some people were still out of town. Everybody's working from home. So coming into work that morning, the large number of people walking the streets, and
There's not a lot of tourists
no,
on Constitution Avenue in January.
the city shut down. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so nothing's open. The Capitol's not open. The museums aren't open. There's nothing for tourists to see except for see outside. And it's beginning of January. It's cold, it's dark, So to see this many people coming in at 6 in the morning, even on a busy day, you're not gonna see that many. It was just an eerie feeling about that day. It was just, this ain't right. It's just, something's wrong, something's off. So driving in, got to the Capitol, 6:30, 6:45, and people are just, it's crowds of people out there already at the Capitol, flags and signs, and the crowd just continued to swell.
Was there any indication from your supervisors that there was going to be a protest, or did they give you any preparation?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's always protests at the Capitol, always. So that's not unusual, but the level of what it was wasn't made clear to us until we were actually in it.
Yeah, that morning, I started around 7 in the morning. I normally work uptown away from downtown Capitol, all that. But, we knew ahead of time that we were activated for what's called CDU, Civil Disturbance Unit, riot control, or First Amendment Assembly assistance. So we started out at 4th District Station, which is uptown, got our marching orders, went downtown. I was originally stationed in front of the IRS building on Constitution Avenue, which is close to the Ellipse where the rally was held. And that morning, it was just people filing into the Ellipse, coming from all over the place, wearing all their Trump gear and all that. I thought the worst part of my day was going to be hearing all the taxation as theft jokes from everybody walking by and looking at the IRS and then looking at me and like, ha ha ha. And I would just look at them like, can I help you? Go to your thing. And then it would be over. And I also thought I couldn't hear the speakers, but I could hear like the pregame music they were playing. It was like Backstreet Boys and Celine Dion and stuff like that.
Probably without their permission. Too,
yeah,
right?
probably. I remember thinking, oh, it's nice that my middle school DJ is still getting work, But then after everybody finished talking and Trump told them to go to the Capitol, they all.
Did you actually hear Trump speak?
I couldn't hear the speakers, but
sort of the muffling.
Yeah, no, I picked that up later. But after it was over, everyone started leaving the Ellipse, going back up Constitution Avenue toward the Capitol. And, I didn't know what was going to happen. So when every now and then people would stop and say, hey, which way is the Capitol? And we'd be like, oh, over there. Sorry.
He could have gave him any direction in the world, but he sent him right to us.
Yeah,
Point him to Virginia.
Yeah.
I should have.
We always say when somebody's asked for directions, we go 2 lefts and a right.
Yeah.
No matter where they're trying to go, 2 lefts and a right.
But things we could hear on the radio, things getting worse and worse at the Capitol. We couldn't leave and go help them though. So we had to wait until our SOD commander, special operations commander in the field said, hey, we need help over here. We need hard platoons, that referring to our hard gear. Get 42 up here, which is my platoon. So we finally heard that, ran back to our vans, got on our gear, drove to the Capitol. And, I'm giving the quick version here, but we marched single file up to the West Terrace. We were attacked, punched, kicked, beaten, knocked down. Eventually, we repelled our attackers, made our way up to the West Terrace, held the line there for some time until eventually that broke. We engaged in hand-to-hand combat again, where I was attacked, beaten. Someone tried to gouge out my eye. I was able to shake them off in time, though, so no permanent damage was done. And
The Taylor Swift reference, take it off.
Oh, no. But we fell back to the Capitol itself as our positions were overrun again. Went inside. I had never been inside the Capitol. Well, I think I had been inside once when I was a kid as a tourist, but effectively never been in the Capitol before. Didn't know where I was. I was separated from my platoon. It didn't have my radio because that was stolen. So I didn't know where I was going. I just had to look for work.
So just to give some context, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
So how many of you were there? How many DC Metropolitan Police officers were in your platoon? And how many protesters were there when you got up to the Capitol?
I mean, we couldn't count the number of,
It was a sea of
red
red hats.
I wouldn't call them
The number
protesters.
was 58 to 1.
Yeah,
for every-
the ratio is about
Yeah.
58 assailants to 1 police officer.
Yeah.
It was like 10,000 of them and however many ratio of us, like 150 to 200 police officers for the first few hours. It was ridiculous. And it's part of, I don't want to get off topic, but just diverting from, to finish up my thought, I found my way into the tunnel leading into the Capitol, engaged in combat there, tried to keep me out as best as I could, got assaulted, crushed, sprayed with chemical munitions, went back inside, sort of got myself to get back together again, went back outside to hold the line at the Capitol again, until eventually reinforcements showed up and we were able to clear the Capitol. And then I didn't leave until,
Hours later.
we didn't leave until 1 a.m. on the 7th.
Gracious.
But and to get to your question, there was no point in counting them because they had practically an unlimited number. Anytime they were exhausted with fighting with us, they just get a fresh person up. And
And they were literally screaming that, like that was
yeah,
part of
we
their.
need fresh
plan.
patriots, as they refer to themselves.
Fresh Patriots to the front.
It wasn't really, we weren't fighting to make arrests. We were fighting to
Survive.
to survive and to protect the people inside.
So Harry, what's going on with you? I mean, you were there first, obviously, and then you call for help to DC. What's going on with you during this timeline?
So the commanders are higher up, those are people that make the calls for backup, reinforcements, help, or whatever. We're just on the front line and we're rank and file officers. And when tourists come up to Capitol or people come to the Capitol that just haven't since January 6th, a lot of them like to ask when they see an officer. So is that the door they went in? And the thing is, my answer is, they went in everywhere. They completely surrounded the entire Capitol building.
It sounds ridiculous, but calling it like a zombie movie is pretty accurate.
Yeah, it was like, you saw the pictures, they're climbing on the walls,
Mhm.
but it happened all around the Capitol. It wasn't just the west side where the mall is or the east side, but it was everywhere, the north, the south. They were surrounded. So it wasn't like one side, oh, we got this side clear. No, everywhere, 360 degrees, entire Capitol surrounded, and they were trying to get in from all around the Capitol. Yes, I was already there But I started my day on the east front. If you're familiar with the side by the Supreme Court, not on the mall, but the attackers came from the mall. And the first radio call that I heard that said, I got to get over there, was a friend of mine, a woman on the radio, just screaming. And you could just hear the panic and desperation in her voice. Send us more units, help, help, help. And you could hear in the voice. And I got to get over there. I got to get over there. I got to go help. And I ran over there. And when I ran around to the other side of the Capitol, that's where I saw just a sea of rioters headed towards us. And literally a scene from a movie. Like they were just coming. They were coming.
So Danny, you've described the rioters repeatedly as terrorists. And in some ways, that totally made sense to me, somebody who is watching this unfold on TV. It seemed like terrorism. But in other ways, it kind of seemed utterly normal, given the previous 4 years leading up to that point. I wonder, and this is a question for each of you, what role do you think the normalization of this ideology played in the culminating of January 6th?
Yeah, the normalization of political violence absolutely played a role. I referred to them as terrorists, not lightly. I looked up the definition beforehand. I don't have it memorized, but it fit what they were doing to a T. So yeah, it's important that everyone acknowledge what it was. And because people have this notion that, we can't have domestic terrorism here in the United States. That's something that happens at some other country overseas, but it absolutely happens here, and it did happen here. And you got to call it what it is. Yeah. The normalization of political violence, it's ongoing today. People attacking Mr. Pelosi with a hammer, people driving by, attacking power stations, people, I think it's New Mexico, shooting up their political opponents' houses. It happens on a large scale and it happens on a small scale. And when people feel that they have no recourse in civilized society, then they're going to resort to violence. And because I don't want to remove any personal accountability from their actions, but it's also true that they were lied to by their leaders, by the media, and so consistently. And that was just amplified in their own little echo chamber, to where that they felt they did not have any recourse, even though the election was completely fair. There was no corruption. It wasn't stolen from anyone. It was just didn't turn out the way they wanted. So that's sort of normalized the violence that we saw that day.
When you think about it, I said before, those individuals were emboldened, right, by the most powerful person on the planet. It's like your mom says, your name is Tony. No matter what anybody says, your name is Tony. Somebody said, my mom said my name is Tony. If nobody else tell me, well, you look, your birth certificate says this. My mom said my name is Tony. I don't care what anybody else says. Kind of like that. The president said, go to the White House, go to the Capitol and do what you did. So they were under orders from the most powerful person on the planet. I don't know about y'all, but if I get that kind of reassurance from somebody that powerful, then yeah, I'm going to do whatever I'm told to do anyway, because I have the reassurance of that person. That's one of the reasons why I'm been so adamant, Danny, also about getting accountability all the way to the top, not just to the people who did it, but the people who emboldened it, people who inspired it, and encouraged it. Because that line, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And no responsibility was had that day. It took zero responsibility. I mean, just go back, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, or maybe, but
Feel free, this is
or maybe, but the the former president, said he'd go shoot a person in the middle of whatever, y'all,
Fifth Avenue,
and nobody would turn their back on him. And he's 100% right, as with what we saw happen that day. And people take that people are easily influenced. So, I'm not everybody, but people are. So when somebody, like I said, in that position tells you to do something, yeah, of course I'm going to do it, right? The president said do it. Now, that doesn't absolve you for your actions because you're still responsible, but is it a reasonable defense? The president literally said, go do it. I mean, you got to take responsibility when you're a person in a position of power, elected officials, police officers, professors, whatever. If you have
Very little power.
very little power, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
But you have to take some responsibility. Your words matter. What you say matters. And so far there hasn't been
Did you ever hear from
accountability
from
from
Mr.
that.
Trump at all after the event?
What you think? What you think?
What would he say?
What you think?
Thank you? I don't know.
Come on, man. Come on, bro.
I had to
Come on, man.
All right, so, okay, Harry, I want to ask you this. I have to ask you this. So, you've recently published a book. Congratulations.
It comes out in October, but yeah.
Oh, it comes out this October?
Yeah. it comes out
Oh,
in
okay.
October, yeah. But go for
So
it.
the title is Standing My Ground, a Capitol Police Officer's Fight for Accountability and Good Trouble. What exactly do you mean by good trouble?
You know, when I just made the decision to publicly tell my story, John Lewis, the Good Trouble is an ode to John Lewis, great civil rights leader, congressman, passed away. Encourage people to get into good trouble, standing up when saying something isn't right, pushing back against falsehoods, see something, say something kind of thing. And I was weighing all these options about, do I say anything? Do I go public? All this backlash that's going to follow, the risk, and I just kept thinking about, in no way I'm comparing myself to John Lewis or Martin Luther King or those individuals, but for them to stand up for something that they thought was right, you know, the least I could do. I mean, Martin gave his life for what he believed in. I could tell my story about what happened. Of course, I'm going to say something, especially as it echoed into people denying what actually happened. And I was like, no, we can't let this happen. The truth has to be out there because they'll just try to push it under, like you've seen it. They're trying to, I don't say whitewashing, I say they're lying about what happened and downplaying it, saying what we saw with our own eyes, y'all didn't see, and what we experienced, we didn't experience. And I refuse to let that go. I'm just one person, but I'm going to fight with all my might to make sure that not on my watch, what they say, not on my watch.
So Danny, you mentioned earlier that when you came on January 6th to back up the Capitol Police, it was like your first time in the Capitol building, which is it's an amazing building that's like awe-inspiring for so many reasons. How did that feel? Like, was there a moment where you just said, "Oh my God, I'm in the Capitol building"? Like, what was that experience like?
I mean, yeah, I guess that was in the back of my mind, but at the same time, you know, you didn't really have time to meditate on it.
Yeah.
There were some other things going on at the
Yeah.
time. So, but yeah, it's a beautiful building. It stands for a lot. And while it's always going to be associated with January 6th to me, but it's also going to be associated with a lot more important things like American democracy. And we shouldn't let the tragedy of that day overshadow the good that it stands for as well. After the building was secure, we actually went into the rotunda where there's a lot of huge murals and a big thing on the ceiling, and we got a picture with my platoon, and it was gorgeous. And you know, we were feeling all good because we secured the building, we won, and you know, it was a dark day, but it was also a victory because they did not stop the transfer of power. We were able to keep it going, and it was a republic, and we kept it. So,
what was it like in the 2 or 3 days after January 6th? Did you get time off? Did you have to keep working? Like what?
well, me personally, I went to the clinic the next day and got checked out. I had I'm pretty sure I had a concussion. I had a big contusion on my head from part of where I was beaten with my own baton. I was, bruised and beat all over. So I was out for a few weeks. But most other officers went back the next day. I
So
know
you kept working, even though clearly, I mean, I think all of us have seen those terrible images of you getting pinned inside the door. And it looked like you're in a lot of pain. I mean, how did you keep going? I mean, for until like 1 a.m. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, we were so incredibly outnumbered that every officer was needed to be there. And while the official number of injured with MPD was, I think, 140, like everyone who fought was injured. The 140 is just the number who actually reported it.
Well, you think about it real quick though, when you said, how did he keep going? Because if he didn't, he would have died, would have been killed. So it wasn't, well, a lot of people say, you saved democracy and all. So we saved our asses too, our own asses, to put it bluntly, like we, as a law enforcement officer, your job, the number one goal is to make sure you go home every night. That's the number one goal. So we were fighting. Yeah, well, I'm appreciative, what the job that we did. And yes, we kept that at the forefront, but I was fighting for my brother and my sister here on the left and the right of me to make sure they went home to their families too. And that's what was, that's what's important. Yeah, there's so many things that day, like human life is, especially of a public servant, I mean, that was front and center of my mind. We gotta make sure everybody goes home safely, I think back, and his first time in the Capitol, he goes, sees a riot. Excuse me, I want to take a picture of that real quick. Excuse me, riot. Hold on, I'm rioting here,
Sorry to interrupt.
so I have to ask this. Let's just acknowledge that you guys are rank and file members. You're not the people who are planning for contingencies or anything. But one of the things my students often notice, and I noticed myself as well, for those of us who saw the 2020 George Floyd protests, was that in many cases, and we're talking about like all over the country, largely peaceful demonstrations by Black Lives Matter were met with overwhelming police force. And I get it. I mean, that's the purpose of riot patrol, is to maintain safety of everybody so people can demonstrate their First Amendment rights. But then when we tuned in on January 6th, you guys didn't have anywhere near the level of support that was needed to like control the riot, let alone your own safety. So I wonder, I guess I wonder what your thoughts about that distinction is, the difference between the responses to the two events.
I'll go first, and I'll let Danny. I always love when people say, I have to ask this question. Like, oh shit. What now? What are you about to say? Oh Lord. But no, I don't want to speculate reasons why when it comes to that. Yes, it was definitely noticeable. And yes, I wonder why. I don't know. I'm not even going to attempt to speculate. I'll let Danny do that because he can get away with a lot more than I can. As we're both still employed by our agencies. So I'm gonna let Danny go ahead and take, as much as he can on that one.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, that's it. I've got I'm staying away from that one, buddy.
Well, like I said, MPD deals with DC primarily. And I can tell you that on January 6th, MPD was fully activated. That means that unless you had leave pre-approved from a long time ago, literally every officer was working that day. And we had to do our best to maintain security, not only throughout the city, but also for that event. So like, even while that event is going on, we got 700,000 other people who need police services. Right. So
there's crimes being committed.
Yeah, we got to divide up when we don't have, thousands of officers to work that. And we don't have thousands of officers to work that 24 hours. So what was going on is when these things go bad, they usually go bad after dark or after the event. It's like well after the event itself, after the law-abiding people go home. This was unique in that it went bad immediately. So while we had other platoons, like my platoon started at 7 in the morning, right? We've got other platoons coming in at 10 in the morning, at noon, and then at 4, and then at 9 so that we have 24/7 coverage.
Hmm.
But that means that not everyone's going to be there at the same time for when it goes bad. So yeah, we had however many officers we had at that time, but not everyone else was in the city working or scheduled to come in at a different time. So while everyone was activated that day, not everyone was there immediately during the worst of the violence. With regards to Black Lives Matter protests and riots, like I said, I worked those. It's very difficult to, first of all, I know that a lot of people say that they're the same, they're not the same. I do not think of them the same. They carry very different meanings. You know, trying to take over a CVS is very different from trying to take over the Capitol. But it's also very difficult to draw comparisons because the protests and riots with Black Lives Matter went on throughout the whole country for like a year, whereas January 6th happened in one place at one time. And so there's many very peaceful protests.
Facilitated by the
Yeah,
president.
facilitated by the president and members of Congress and maybe the Supreme Court. But anyway,
See,
the Black Lives Matter protests, many largely peaceful protests, and there were examples of riotous behavior. And in DC, when we had protests that became, criminal, it was on a such much smaller scale to where we could make arrests and do that sort of, even when there's hundreds of people, it wasn't like 10,000 people. And so we could take proactive stance on that. I can't speak to every example of use of force throughout the country against someone who's protesting Black Lives Matter stuff. I wasn't there. I don't know what they're experiencing. All I can speak of is what I experienced and what I saw. And I did not, while I did work those protests, I did not use any force on any Black Lives Matter, or if you want to call them Antifa people. They were very, very defensive. When they were met with force, they would retreat. Whereas, and their objective, it's much more difficult to call their violence, it's political, but I can't really say they're terrorists because their objectives appear to be more violence for the sake of violence or anarchy. Like they would attack a McDonald's or the Department of Veterans Affairs, whereas, and then they would retreat. Whereas the people on January 6th would attack the Capitol. They had very clearly stated goals. They wanted to kill members of Congress, the vice president. They wanted to overturn the election. But it was such a disparate group in 2020 throughout the whole country, throughout the whole year, that you can't really, it's impossible to make one-on-one comparisons.
No.
Does that answer your question at all? Okay.
Harry, I wanted to ask you as well, what were the days after January 6th like for you?
I left around 1 o'clock that morning, next morning, January 7th, and then came back to work 6 o'clock in the morning, just enough to go home, shower, all the pepper spray and bear spray off of you. And then when the water hit the part of your body, like, oh crap, I'm bleeding here. And you know how you got cut or bruised, and just enough time to go home and give my dog some food, let her out. I drank bourbon in the shower, and I laid down. I don't remember falling asleep, but I went back to work because policing, like I said, you can't just say, all right, guys, it's a bad day, we're gonna close today. That's not how policing works. It's not how the government works. Because if any of y'all familiar and followed it the rest of that night, Congress went on and certified the election like 2 or 3 in the morning. Which actually, on a side note, makes me feel very proud, one, as an American, and two, as a police officer, because as ugly as that day was and all the horror that came out of it, Congress still went on, like in a shit, can I say that?
Yeah.
Literally
Public
shit
university.
stain. A chamber, and I'm not using that as literally was
Like
on the
literally?
walls,
So somebody.
yeah, it was defecated on, it was BC, it was, they desecrated this pinnacle of our democracy.
But I got energy. I almost had to pee on the floor because I couldn't find a bathroom. I did find one though, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But no, but just it made me proud though, because like I said, our job is to be able to provide a safe environment. And while we made it safe eventually, it was able to go on later that night. And that made me very proud that these people's objective was to stop the certification of the election. And through our hard work, Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, and the other partners that responded, Virginia State Police, they responded in tremendous force. That happened. The certification happened. And that was one of the.
You won't really appreciate that, but Virginia State Police got some big old boys.
They
We
really do.
were really excited when they showed up.
They
like, "Oh."
walked in, and I'm talking each one of them 6'3", 6'4", just walking in. Where are they? Where are they? God, it's good to see you.
So they were like,
They're there. Go get them.
they were the first to come.
I don't know.
There
if
were
they-
agencies from everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, as far as New Jersey,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
I think the first one might have been like Montgomery County, maybe.
Okay.
I like when they showed up on the terrace, I clapped. And once they were secured the area, I went back inside and just laid down.
But also you got to remember, this was hours. This wasn't like 30 minutes, an hour, even 2 hours of it happening. This was 3-4 hours later, for the first little bit of help showed up. And I don't criticize them at all, but thank God they were there. But to answer your question about the following days, man, for me personally, I was in a blur. I was in a bad, depressed state. Mental health is very important to me, and I had really, really bad mental health the following days. I'm an FTO, field training officer, so that means any new officer that comes with me, once they graduate, they go along 6 weeks now, 6-week evaluation period where I show them what it's like out in the field. And I had a trainee assigned to me. And I literally told him, look, man, I ain't got nothing. Just go somewhere and
Wow.
find something to do.
So on January 6th, you had a trainee. assigned to
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Wow.
Oh, you did really?
Mhm.
Holy shit.
He got knocked out in a concussion,
Dang.
literally 20 minutes into it. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
he still with Capitol?
Yeah, he still is.
Oh,
He
good,
still
good.
is. But everybody was just, it was just like a sense of like disbelief. We're still trying to process what happened. We still had coworkers that were still in the hospital in the following days. Want to make sure they're okay. We had lost an officer. But also, which we don't realize, we had an inauguration to get ready for. Inauguration, January 20th. So we still had to go back, and COVID was happening, and we lost, not lost, they didn't die. They were out with COVID. We lost over like 100 officers because of the January 6th riots. Because you think those people had masks on?
No.
So, I mean, after January 6th, we had hundreds of officers, maybe about 100 on the dot, maybe, that went out with COVID. So we're even stretched even more thin. So, but that's the thing, when you take that oath and you sign up to do your job, even if the times are tough or damn near impossible, you're still committed to trying. Like putting a Band-Aid over a big ass hole in the wall, or trying to stop a leak or something. I'm trying. I can't do it by myself, but you're going to try. And I commend the men and women that kept on showing up.
What was the vibe like on Capitol Hill, like in the days that followed? I mean, because
Just like it was, I'm telling you, it was just, you walk around, it's no pomp and circumstance. It's just a somber feeling.
like
Because you got to walk
Republicans
around, man. You look, the windows at the Capitol were broken still, not replaced 2-3 months, 4 months afterwards. They still got cracks in the walls, destroyed every doors, and the floors that didn't shine because people were spraying us with fire extinguishers. I mean, it was like going to work in a crime scene. You go back to work and you're just, all right, I'm here.
I remember I remember the National Guard showed up and they were there for a long time. And part of one of the longest days usually for a DC police officer is inauguration or that weekend. And like to the point where people measure how long they have until retirement by how many inaugurations they have to work. Like I got 2 more inaugurations, man, I can do this. But that one was, I was still out injured, but I understand that one was a little more easier because there was just flooded with National Guardsmen everywhere and police and everything, and no one was allowed near, so it was pretty chill.
Yeah, they put fences up, not just around the Capitol, but there were roadblocks. You couldn't even get like within a 4 or 5 block radius of the Capitol. I mean, anybody.
I remember reading about how people were upset about National Guard like sleeping on the floor or something. And I remember thinking, I'm glad that they're getting that attention, but at the same time, why weren't they upset when I was sleeping outside when I was in the It's fine. It's fine. Good for them.
So when did you actually go back and start doing your normal job, like as a cop? Like how?
I don't remember when the CDU detail ended. It was still going on when I went back weeks later. It was after the inauguration. I don't remember which day it was.
Was it hard to just go back to normal life? Like you've just experienced one of the most important and traumatizing chapters in American history.
Well, that's the thing. Normal is redefined now. It's not normal. It's life post January 6th. It's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not be normal.
It's not really over because it's, I mean, both mentally and physically for so many, and it's still in the news. We've still got, people are getting arrested every day. I think the FBI arrested someone yesterday. We're still trying to get accountability for people who are in power. So it's not really over. It's just ongoing.
So how do you cope with that? The obvious physical, emotional toll of this event. How have you been able to heal?
I always tell people I've been very fortunate both physically and mentally. Not everyone has been as fortunate as me. I know there are still officers who are out from that day, like years later. They cannot physically do their jobs. Some have been medically retired. Some are experiencing, PTSD, mental issues, and they're trying to get help with that. You just got to be there for them and support them as best you can, whether that means, just listening to their problems or helping them find another job.
I'll speak on me. I'm a huge proponent of mental health, and I encourage people to go to therapy and seek help in counseling and talking about it. Because one thing's for sure, these problems, they won't go away. They just come back disguised as something different. And trauma is trauma no matter what, and you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it, period, full stop. Like it doesn't go away. It may just bury its head for a little bit. It's like them cicadas. They come back, every 12 years, they're gonna come out the ground or something. Like, God damn, these things still here. But you can't get rid of. So that's what unresolved trauma is. A cicada, it comes back. It will always come back until you deal with it. Peer support groups. This is therapeutic for me. Talking about it sucks. But telling people what we went through, what our coworkers went through, seeking accountability, it's just traumatizing in its own way, but it's therapeutic because it's getting it out there. It's not remaining in this pressure cooker, like, I gotta talk to somebody about this. But you're getting it out there, it's talking about it, and that's been very beneficial for me.
What do you see as justice in all of this? I saw, by the way, that you testified at a trial for a member of the Oath Keepers.
Yeah, 5 of them. I said before, I'm glad that I'm not the one who determines, what these guys' sentences are, because if you looked at me wrong that day, I want you to go to jail for the rest of your life. Like, wait, you looked, don't ever, you're done for life. I'm not in a reasonable mindset to determine what an appropriate punishment is. And I can admit that. But there has to be something done. And for so many people involved, there hasn't been anything done. And that's where I have the problem. And that's why I'm continuing to speak out and never shutting up about this. Like, you know, after it was over, the former president tweeted, you know, never forget this day. And I swear to God, I never will. You're right, bro. I'm gonna make sure you never forget it either. So.
Danny, I mean, in some ways, like you were like physically assaulted by multiple people. Have they been able to track down who those people were and charge them?
Yeah, not everyone, but definitely some people. The guy I testified at the trial, the guy who had me pinned with a shield, he was found guilty of multiple felonies. I believe his sentencing is this month. I'm gonna be I don't know, you're probably seeing the video, but the guy who grabbed my mask and banged my head against the wall was, you know, beating me up and all that. His trial is gonna be in April. I testified in New Mexico, and in a civil trial, we actually were able to, this is the first time ever in like 100 years that the 14th Amendment was successfully used to ban an insurrectionist from holding office. So we were successful there, and hopefully it sets, Coy Griffin, sets a precedent going forward for other people seeking office. But we, and I've been down to the FBI office many times, and they show me video of getting assaulted, and they're like, do you recognize that guy? And it's just a guy in like a sea of people. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I wish I could tell you, but you know, video of me just getting hit in the head with a pole and then like spinning out and then getting attacked again. I don't remember that at all. So
is it hard to watch that over and over again?
It doesn't, it's not as bad as it used to be. It's weirdly fascinating when you see something new, like oh, I haven't seen this angle before.
There's so much video.
Yeah,
Which is weird. You would think that like by this time I would have seen everything, but when you see new, wait, what? That? Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Like I'm blown away. Like
everybody had their phones out, and there is no shortage of evidence. You know, it was all very self-incriminating. The guy who was beating me up had his phone on. I remember because he had the light on, and he put it in his mouth, so he had both hands free to assault me with. And then I couldn't do anything. I just said, you know, stand there and take it.
when I testified, they played video of me that I had never even seen before. Not only had I never seen it, I don't even remember doing it. So your mind is all over the, like I said, you focus on survival. I was like, wait, that happened? Clearly, you know, but I wasn't as traumatized by watching it. I want to say trigger. I don't like using the word trigger, like some whatever. I'm gonna do a TED talk about that. Word triggered. But no, I attribute that to coping skills learned in therapy and being able to learn how to process it. I've had a PTSD attack back in September, and I thought I was fine prior to that, and then it just came out of nowhere, and I was in it had the potential to be very bad, but I had coping skills. I learned how to deal with it, and I think it saved me.
So I want to ask one more question before I open the floor for audience members. So if you have a question, hold on to it for a minute. This is a question that Professor Wrighton wanted me to ask. You both have sacrificed so much for democracy, and like physically, emotionally, your careers, everything. Was it worth it?
Oh yeah, no contest. I mean, it's the fulcrum of history is on display that day, and we got to play a part in preserving American democracy. I mean, how many people can say that, right?
Definitely. I would say it's like you being the average guy that nobody knows. You know, 4 of us, 5 now, testified about our specific experiences. And Danny jokes that nobody recognizes him or heckles him or anything like that because he's just a normal looking white guy.
Very generic looking white guy.
Like,
I could go to the next Trump rally and no one would
like,
bat.
yeah, we see you, brother. Yeah.
So is that like a thing that's happening?
Yeah. So Michael Fanone, one of the other officers, testified, very tattooed,
Very distinctive.
very distinct. He says MFer a lot and with a Southern twang, you know, and he's distinguishable. And I'm 6'7" black man that, yeah, this dude, that's a big dude. I know who you are. We get heckled, get death threats. people like walking around, I'm looking like, all right, this guy looked like a Trump supporter. I wonder if he's after me or what about him? Or all right, he looks okay. So I'm like scouting out the room. Like I'm looking in here, like, all right, is anybody here going to stand up and scream? It was stolen. I'm looking around like somebody needs to say it. Which one is it? Who's going to do it? So I think that's in my mind, it's my mindset. I'm going forward. Somebody's going to jump out and confront me about speaking out. When we leave the hearings, at the January 6th hearings, we're always confronted outside with hecklers, and they just look at Danny and say, "Hey, buddy," they don't know who he is.
It's weirdly offensive that nobody comes at me. Like after we testified, they made fun of all the others on Fox, gave them like fake actor awards or something. They didn't say anything about me.
Seriously, they did that?
No, yeah, Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson attacked us personally on their shows, and they created this best political driven performance, best over exaggeration performance, and they gave them out like as insults to us, and they had our pictures up on the screen,
And I didn't get
and
anything.
he didn't get anything.
I
I
don't
might
want
be one of them, man. I don't know.
Does anybody want to ask a question? There's a microphone right there. Let's see. Go ahead. If you don't mind speaking to the microphone, because we're recording.
One of my questions that I always was interested in is why didn't any of the officers use their sidearm to repel? I mean, if you're getting hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, that's
Yeah.
justifiable lethal force right there.
Sure.
I'll answer the fire extinguisher part, and then I'll let Danny give a pretty good answer about this. But the video you're talking about, somebody get hit with a fire extinguisher in a sea of 10,000 people, it just kept flying in the crowd. You don't know who threw it. You shoot the wrong person, then what? I didn't do nothing. I was standing next to the guy. So who do you shoot? So Danny's gonna give a good answer.
Yeah, I'm sure that when many people see in the news, use of deadly force, it looks like it's usually in the news because it's controversial or it's bad, flat out bad. It looks like there's not a lot of rules associated with it, but there are a lot of rules associated with deadly use of force by a police officer. And those rules are written in the context of traffic stops or out of house for a domestic violence incident. They are not written for a small army attacking the capital of the United States. They're not written for use in a riot. That was an extremely unique situation on the 6th. And one of the reasons why officers didn't is because it's such a chaotic, dynamic environment to where, let's say, you guys are insurrectionists and you throw a 2x4 at my head. That could be considered deadly force, right? And then, but you do it and then it's over. You don't have a 2x4 in your hand anymore. Can I still shoot you? No, not really. Or it's say you throw one and you do have another one and you're running back to throw another one. I look at you, but you like fade back into the crowd. I cannot reasonably shoot at you because there is a good chance I'm gonna hit the person on your left or right who's just screaming. They're not exercising serious use of force against me. I cannot justify that. What's something that you hear a lot is that police officers did not use lethal force because the people who attacked us were white, or they're Christian, or they're Republicans or something like that. I can guarantee you that is not the reason. It's just not. I can't speak for every police officer out there. You're gonna have police officers who have their own biases. Many of them are bad, but we do not use force based on your political leanings or your race or anything like that. Me personally, one reason I did not use force is because before we were called the Capitol and I was still on Constitution Avenue, I heard over the radio that our EOD, our explosive ordnance disposal team, found a viable device. So they found a bomb.
Two.
No, the first, they didn't find that one. So I just heard the first one before I got called out.
Okay.
And then on my way, when I was marching up to the West Terrace of the Capitol, my radio was stolen. So I didn't get any more updates on that. So I didn't know how many bombs there were in the city around the Capitol. I didn't know they're on a timer, a remote detonator. I didn't know what the signal was for them to be set off. In my mind, I thought that because they hadn't set off yet, maybe the insurrectionists were waiting for escalation from the police. So would deadly force trigger be the signal for them to set off these bombs, however many there were? Also, we knew that there were tons of weapons in the crowd, firearms, knives, chemical munitions, tasers, everything you can think of, much of which can be used in a deadly way. And if I shot someone and it was 100% legally justified, that might be the signal for everyone to start taking out their firearms and shooting back at us. And when it's 150 versus 10,000, that's not a fight we're going to win. So it was in everyone's best interest to try to, even in that situation, not necessarily de-escalate, but not escalate it to the point of lethal force.
It's really amazing that there weren't more deaths.
Yeah.
If you consider
Yeah,
the anger.
I'll try to paint just a quick picture real quick. Any one of you all could just imagine yourself sitting right here with us three. You look up and all of y'all at one time just start attacking us right now. Y'all run down here and y'all just start attacking us. Some of y'all punching us. Somebody's got mace in their purse and they pull it out and spray it from the back. Somebody's chucking batteries at us. We got our guns out. Which person do I shoot first? Does anybody, who this is not a rhetorical question. I'm asking, does anybody have an idea of who I shoot first? Okay, let's go with that. That person closest to me just punched me. That doesn't warrant deadly force. Somebody just punched me. Or, okay, that person's screaming really loud at me. He's yelling, hurting my ears. Called me a bad word. Him first. That doesn't warrant deadly force. Person that's got a pepper spray is 3 people behind spraying over people's heads. Do I shoot that person and risk hitting the 2 people in front of them who need to be arrested, but don't need to be shot? You know, it's so nuanced, the using deadly force. Like Danny said, it's not, the use of force continuum was not designed for an all-out riot. So when people say, you know, that we use great restraints, and I don't, sure, but I would prefer to use their training was fantastic, and they displayed not necessarily restraint, but great reliance on their trainings.
And there's another, I mean, absolute worst case scenario, let's say we went like full on massacre mode. There was no discretion. All officers decided to use force, lethal use of force. We would have run out of bullets a long time before we ran out of terrorists. That's just how absurdly outnumbered we were.
Is there another question? Yeah, right here.
Okay.
You might have to switch the mic on. I think there's like a little, is it good? All right, cool.
Okay, cool. I want to start off by saying thank you guys for being here. It's really, really cool. We talk about you in class all the time, and like I've written papers about you. So getting to talk to you in person is so cool. Yeah, you specifically, actually.
Really?
No. So I wanted to ask you guys, I know we've all seen the videos on social media of people that were in like when the insurrectionists went into like the side rooms in Nancy Pelosi's office and all that. There were officers in there with them and they weren't forcing them to leave. They were being very, very nice to them, like nicer than they deserved. And they weren't forcing them to leave. How did you guys feel being like you were being personally attacked and officers were just sitting in the side room?
I struggle with that a little bit. And also, and I'll just put it out there, a lot of those videos that you've seen on social media are very misleading. Specifically, there's one that shows an officer going like this and everybody comes running in, like they're waving the insurrection. No, what happened in that particular clip was that person that was waving to waving to other officers who was caught in the crowd, telling them to come and retreat, get back. It wasn't talking them. But as far as the men and women that I know fought bravely, valiantly. it's no doubt in my mind that a lot of people there were scared. Hell, I was scared shitless, if we're to put it bluntly. And a lot of people were focused on surviving. If that meant trying to reason with people and, you know, you got 30 people surrounding, it's just one officer. Get out. What's them to say? No, you get out. It's one of you, and they've already shown they don't care about listening to what we're saying. So maybe they just tried to reason with the humanity, the human side of these people, and just try to talk. I don't know specifically each situation. I don't know. But I know that I was talking to them people. I mean, I started cussing at them. You know, I was like, all right, enough's enough. Like, lady, that's where's the bathroom? Get the fuck out. Like, I don't care. Like, get out. Like, but everybody responded to stress, which was clearly all the way up here, a specific way. I have a trouble finding fault in people's methods of survival that day. Sure, we all may have handled things differently, but I'm not going to fault. Obviously, if it turned out that they were like sympathizers, that's different. But as far as just not being mean to them, I can't find fault with those individuals. I may have done it differently, but I'm not going to criticize them because they made it home that night.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to see that. But at the same time, you think about, okay, so let's say that they don't be nice to them. They're in a side room. They cannot call for backup because all officers are occupied. They, if the guy's just, you know, screwing around in Nancy Pelosi's office, that's not really, you can't use a lot of force justifiably for that. So
She's not in there, obviously.
Yeah. So what do? You say, get out, they say no. What do? You can't call for backup, you can't arrest them because you don't have the resources. You can't use a lot of force on them because that's not legally justifiable. So I mean, trying to reason with them sounds ridiculous, but at the time it seems like your best option. And it's terrible. I wish we had the resources to arrest everybody that day, but we just didn't. We couldn't even guarantee our own safety, let alone the safety of prisoners. So people did what they had to do.
I think I saw a question here. Yeah, go ahead.
She got 1776 on her shirt. We gotta watch
Oh,
out. All the people, they were chanting 1776. So I'm like, uh-oh, she's about to say.
Firstly, I wanted to say thank you very much for the bravery that you guys showed during one of the most, I say, terrifying recent moments in American history.
Thank you.
I don't think that many people could have done what you guys did and made it out intact. So thank you. Second, my boyfriend's relative is on the explosive K-9 unit who were handling the pipe bombs that were at January 6th. But someone on my side of the family is very much so a conspiracy theorist who's like, well, it wasn't really a coup, and if it wasn't really that bad, and it wasn't really an insurrection. And how do you respond to that type of person when they accuse Capitol Police and DC Police of just letting people in? Because it's a very popular conspiracy theory.
So good question. And I'm glad that you asked that. There are people that are going to be conspiracy theorists about what happened. I'm of the mindset that we can debate, have different opinions on what happened, but not what happened. There's footage, there's testimonials and about what happened. It was the most documented crime in American, like everybody in the building was on Facebook Live and streaming it, and we did it, guys. What more, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Don't argue with those type of people. I say, is there anything I can say to you, show you, to make you think otherwise, to see what really happened? They say no, then discussion's over. Family, friends, daughter, sorry, man, you nuts. And I can't help you. I can't help you. And you don't engage with these people because I'm telling you, it's going to drive you nuts. You just got to realize that there are some fucked up people out there There's some, sorry if my language offended anybody.
I've heard it before.
I would say, I'm sure, but I apologize. I'm getting a little fired up because I know what, I've seen it. I've seen it and it will drive you mad. I'm telling you, don't try to convince these people. Some of the death threats I get saying I'm getting paid by the Democrats and I'm a pawn. I'm broke as shit. I don't have no money. What do you mean I'm getting paid? It's so frustrating because the truth is right there in their face. And they're choosing to tell us that what we went through didn't happen. And they're choosing that what you all saw happen that day wasn't as bad as it looked. No, you're right, it wasn't as bad. It was 10 times worse than what it looked like. So don't engage with these people. Just, all right, is there anything that I can say or show you, make you see it? No, okay, we're done. We're done. And that's, as you can tell, it makes me upset. So, yeah. But so
Any other
don't
questions?
engage with those people.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, there's people out there who make their money off of the outrage from, conservative people in America. They make their money, they get their clicks, their views. So they're not coming from a place of intellectual honesty. So there's no point in engaging them in debate. The important thing is to try to recognize people who are not coming from a place of intellectual honesty with people who have been lied to and try to help that second group. I've had, coming back from one of the hearings, I went back to the station, walking back to the building. I had an officer actually ask me, so do you really think it was Trump people? Like a member of MPD asked me that. I was like, yeah, I do think it was Trump people. As you can't, it's really a mark of how incredible the, I kind of hate saying this word, the partisanship of the media and the strength of the echo chamber. I think that we need to revisit the fairness doctrine, if any journalism students out there. I think that because the current climate in terms of political reporting is untenable. I think we've really seen that on the 6th. And yeah, there's these people that you just have to do your best to give them the evidence in a kind and understanding way. And some of them are going to listen to you. It might not seem like it, but like I said, I'm born and raised in North Carolina. All my family's from Tennessee. All my cousins talk like this. I got very conservative people in my family, and they're good people. They support me. They believe me, even though a lot of their friends and neighbors don't. And if you reach people, you can. And if you can't, you just got to deal with them another way.
Yeah, I realize there's some people that continue to be willfully ignorant. You made the choice right now there's the questions that you have can be answered by doing X, Y, and Z. But you don't want to seek out X, Y, and Z because one, it make you got to do work, or it got to make you reverse your initial thought, which nobody likes looking wrong. Nobody likes to admit they were wrong. I don't know if y'all watched the January 6th hearing, but they showed clips of Trump trying to do his speech. For afterwards, he was like, we lost the election. Scratch that. I don't want to say we lost the election. Willfully ignorant. And it would have given his base, whatever. Willfully ignorant people, they choosing to be willfully ignorant. That's enough.
All he had to do was say, we lost. That's all he had to
Imagine
do.
that.
So simple.
Imagine that.
So you had a question, and I had another question over here. Why don't you go first? And you can, if you can walk over to the microphone so we can all hear you.
Hello. I just have a quick question. Just any thoughts on the veterans or other service members who took part with the rioters on January 6th?
It's absolutely incredible to me. I remember people shouting at me while I was on the line that, we fought for this country. What do you think we're doing now? And you telling me that you're on the wrong side of history. And at the time, I was hoping it was some stolen valor stuff, but the news is incredible about just all these, insane conspiracy theorists and white supremacists who have a military background. And, I'm not a huge military guy. I did 6 years in the Guard. That's not a lot, but it still hurts me on a personal level that they could betray the country so blatantly. They don't deserve their benefits. They should be at a minimum, get their benefits revoked, especially if they've got a pension, retirement. Michael Flynn is still getting his pension, even though he advocated the overthrow of the United States government.
That dude's a scumbag. Yeah.
It's incredible. At very least, they should have their benefits revoked. At the most, they should get UCMJ'd, Uniform Court of Military Justice.
Anybody who takes that oath of office, defend the Constitution again, blah, blah, blah. Those aren't just words that you say. Like, that's when people say they want to be police officers or join the military. Make sure you're doing it for the right reason. Not just because you want to feel important or to get your point across. It's not about you, it's something bigger. This country, like I was ashamed to say I'm a patriot because they hijacked that word, and everybody who was associated with January 6th said, we're patriots. Actually, you know what? I'm going to reclaim that word. You weren't patriots, you're an asshole. I'm a patriot, my coworkers are patriots, We're the real patriots, right? And you got to do it for the right reason. I love my country. I love this country. I love America. No matter who is the president, no matter who's the congressman, I love this country because we actually have a say. Who is the president? Who is the congressman? Who are our state senators? And if we don't like it, we get to vote and try to do it again. Everybody doesn't get their way all the time. You don't. Another time. Yeah, sheesh. But no, they're not patriots, and it's despicable that they claim to represent the same oath that we took, and we're totally doing completely different things.
So we had one question over here.
Too.
I just want to say thank you for being here and everything you guys do. I'm from a policing family, so I remember watching the news on January 6th and just being terrified for the person I love that is a police officer. And I'm just wondering, I know you said that there wasn't a lot of time to process the day of anything past surviving, but you've spoken about the difference between the Black Lives Matter protests and the insurrection. And what has the process been like to think about the fact that a lot of these people for years helped belittle people fighting for the value of their lives with your profession, and then literally used blue line flags to beat the shit out of the people who work there? What's the process of like processing that?
For me, you call it for what it is. It's just a talking point. Trump's out there selling blue lives matter flags with his name on it. They call it the grift, right? It's just, you say anything that sounds cool, it's a talking point. Show me with your actions, and you know what, you're just full of hot air. It's so blatant, the contradictions and the hypocrisy, that I don't even acknowledge it. Nobody's allowed to sit in this theater with a green shirt on, all right? Everybody except me can sit in here, it's the hypocrisy is just so blatant. It doesn't even deserve to be acknowledged. You call it out, okay, what it is, but I've gotten so, I guess, numb to expecting people's actions to not match their words that I just call it for what it is, and it's just a bunch of BS.
Obviously, I'm generalizing a little bit, but nobody really likes the police. Nobody's like, that police officer makes me feel comfortable. I'm so glad there's an armed person here looking suspicious of everybody. Nobody calls the police when they're having a good time. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. So when, conservatives say, oh, back to blue, they're just virtue signaling. They see that liberal or Democrats take more critical positions of law enforcement in the country, and like so many other things, it's just a reaction to oppose whatever they support. So, and it's the nature, I think law enforcement by nature is more conservative, because conservatism at its best is about preserving that what you feel is good, whereas liberalism at its best is about changing that what you perceive as bad. And law enforcement is about preservation of the law.
You'll write that down. That was good.
Yeah, can I use that? Can I use that? Is that all right?
We'll talk about it later.
No, say it. Yes. That was good.
But
Conservatism is, say it again. That was good, dude. Like, really.
yeah, let me write a book.
Okay, yeah, go for it, dude.
Okay.
I know a guy, you know?
Yeah, no, but so, yeah, I think law enforcement attracts conservative people. That doesn't necessarily mean all law enforcement is conservative, racist, blah, blah, blah. But it's, I can't even remember what the question was.
Sorry.
I hope
man.
that
Yeah,
helped.
was good.
So we had one question here.
Hi, I was just wondering how you feel about like the people in power that were promoting and supporting the insurrection before, during, or after, and the fact that they are still in power and being supported.
Virtue signaling, that's the word I was trying to think of. The conservative, largely virtue signaling. I'm sorry.
Guys, no, that's a great question. For elected officials, what's the number one thing that somebody can do for accountability towards elected officials? Vote them out, right? So if these people, after saying what they've said and done what they've done, still get elected, what does that mean? That the people are okay with it, or the majority, they won, enough people said that they're okay with it, then said that they're not okay with it. We can't always pick and choose which parts of democracy we like, whether they agree with us or disagree with us. Hey, you said January 6th with it. You're elected official. Oh, you got to go. Well, my district said that I don't. Okay. So you can't really pick and choose. We know that's fine. And that's kind of like, wherever you stand, whether it's COVID's a hoax or abortion or pro-life, whatever, take any issue. If you're people that are responsible, you're accountable to back home, and I keep going like this, like back in your home district. If those people say that they are okay with you doing what you're doing, as long as it's not criminal, then what more can you really do? Like I said, the number one sign of accountability, or thing that you can do for accountability, is vote them out or vote them in. And that's just an ugly truth of democracy, and not piggybacking, or cherry picking what you like or don't like about it. And we can't be hypocritical, even though, like I said, yes, I clearly feel that they shouldn't be, but that's not how it works,
Yeah, it's maddening, seeing all these people who tried to overthrow the government of the United States, working for the government of the United States. This sedition caucus has largely been voted back into Congress. And companies, it's fortunately, you can't really talk about politics without talking about the money in this country. And so many companies promised, oh, they're not going to donate to the sedition caucus anymore. And then one by one, they've broken their promises. They're donating to PACs, they're funding these congressional campaigns, getting these people back into Congress. And yeah, it's terrible because, as police, we can't get political publicly unless it involves criminal activity like January 6th did, which is why we're here. But we have to let the people make their choices, even if they're really, really dumb choices. So yeah, it's maddening, and you just have to do your best to educate people as to why it's maddening, and hope that you can change enough minds to where instead of getting voted in by 51%, they get voted out by 49%.
Almost happened with Laura Boebert.
Yeah.
Lauren Boebert.
Yeah,
That was
real
so close.
Very
It was
close.
like 500 people, I think.
Something like that. Well, we don't have time for any more questions, but I want to give you both the last word. What do you hope that we take from our conversation today?
It's what I say about anytime. The takeaways from January 6th are how democracy is only as strong as the people who participate in it and the people who believe in it. You might have, before the 6th, had the impression that it's a given. especially in this country, that, coups, insurrections, that sort of thing that happens somewhere else. You don't have to worry about that here, but it can happen here. It did happen here. And it requires constant vigilance and critical thinking skills and participation to make sure that it doesn't happen. So please don't take it for granted.
Biggest thing, like you said, is participation. People just need to care. I just think there's so much, people are just so disengaged because they don't believe, one, that their voice is heard, or whatever I say, it won't matter. Probably not, right? Nobody cares what you have to say. But I say that sarcastically, it does matter. You do have a say. You go out there blindly voting for a candidate without knowing anything about that person. You got people out here making decisions for you. They make decisions for you. At least know what they're about. Have a say, at least personally, intrinsically motivated. I'm not going to support somebody that says X, Y, and Z. I don't support that. I'm going to vote for the guy who says what I want. So care, because it may come down to your vote, but don't blindly support people. Oh, my vote doesn't matter. Care. If enough people cared, like the largest, demographic or population of isn't Democrats, Republicans, or independents. It's non-voters. Imagine if the percentage of non-voters actually voted. Like, they don't care. So I think it was 39% of people eligible voters that didn't vote. That's a lot of people.
It's even higher in some elections.
That's so crazy. Like, people just need to care, and not only care when it's convenient.
Yeah, this fiction that people who don't vote say, oh, nobody represents me, both sides are the same, everybody's corrupt, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. Both sides are not the same.
Not even remotely close.
You're just lazy. You're intellectually lazy and you want to see him above it all, but you're not. You're not above it all. You're down here with us. Get involved.
Well, thank you both so much for coming and speaking your truths. Maybe we could give them a round of applause to thank them. I'll be buying your book.
Okay, good.
And I'll wait for yours to come out.
If y'all had questions that didn't get answered, I'll stick around for a little bit and answer your questions. If you had a question that you didn't get to ask, I'll stick around and answer it. So, but thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I turn this mic off for a second.